And welcome back to the Aviation Podcast. I'm Ken, and today our special guest is Sawyer Raffield. Hey there, Sawyer.
Hey,
how are you, bud?
I'm doing good, Ken. How about you?
I'm great. Sawyer's with us today. We're going to talk a little bit about aviation. And one of the topics that we brought up today is one that affects all of us.
Sure does.
The head of the FAA, or at least the acting administrator of the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, Mr. Billy Nolan, has announced he is stepping down. Now, this has been, he's been in the position about a year, or at least it'll be about a year by the time he steps down. And in that year, I think it'd be fair to say there's been some issues. There's been things going on in the industry, in our national airspace, and Mr. Nolan certainly had a lot on his plate. So, Sawyer, when you read this article here, when you hear that Mr. Nolan is stepping down, you know, this is the head of the FAA. Who's driving the ship?
Yeah, so that's the scary part about it. So, kind of going back before Mr. Nolan, they haven't had an actual administrator for past few years. Like you said, he's just been kind of filling in as the FAA administrator, and they're having a very hard time of finding the right candidate. I'm sure a lot of people have already seen the video of Biden's nominee, Washington. And that was horrible to see. I mean, I honestly just felt sorry for the guy when I saw that video. He didn't get a single aviation-related question right. None of them were correct. And Ken, we were talking about this before the podcast, but one of my favorite parts of that was when they asked, you know, some of the restrictions of basic med. And he said, well, I would imagine high blood pressure being a problem under basic med. And so it just goes to show, like, the people that, you know, some of our government officials try to nominate are not the best. They have no clue. And the best part about that was his excuses. He'd always have the excuse, well, I'm not a pilot. I don't know these things. But you are trying to become the head of the FAA, and you don't know simple questions such as restrictions under basic med. Like, that's scary. That's a very scary thought. So they're going to have a really tough time of finding somebody that can replace Billy Nolan. And like you said, he probably hasn't done the best job either. There's been a lot going on, you know, which we'll talk about as we keep on going. And the fact that you mentioned that he even stated that it's going to be busy this summer when it's already very busy with everything going on, that's pretty nerve-wracking to think about. And, you know, both of us being in the aviation field, both drones and the man side of things, I don't know where it's going to lead.
I don't either. You know, there's a lot of progress being made right now as far as the technology goes. You know, we could see things could get better. Things could be organized. They could be efficient. They could be this. They could be that. And it all sounds great on paper, but in practice, in reality, what we've seen over the last 3 or 4 months has been anything but. I mean, we had the great NOTAM outage of 2023 in January. That was fun. You know, right after that, we've got, you know, 3, 4, 5, 6 near misses happening across the country. Busy airports, large planes, and these weren't small Cessnas or Pipers. No. We're talking full airliners, full cargo aircraft that, you know, that's a lot of damage. That's a lot of, you know, that's a big issue, a big risk. And now we see that Mr. Billy Nolan is going to be stepping down. Now, you know, honestly, Mr. Nolan has a tremendous amount of experience. As compared to the person that they were going to replace him with, Mr. Phil Washington, which I agree. that was it wasn't it wasn't promising. I'll say
It
that.
wasn't pretty.
It wasn't. I mean, at after watching that, I think I'm going to nominate myself to be the head of the
Yep.
FAA because I answered more questions than he did. Uh, but that's he's already pulled himself out of the running. He's pulled his consideration. Mr. Nolan is stepping down. So what's next?
Right.
Who is next in line that we in this United States national airspace between manned pilot and drone, rockets, space. I mean, there's launches going up. It seems like every other day now. Who's going to keep all this together?
Well,
You
and they
know,
better hurry up and find somebody because, as he stated in this article, he wants to be gone before summer. So, I mean,
yeah,
they do not have much time. So, it'll be very interesting, especially, again, going back to the comment he made about how it's going to be really, really busy this summer. And when you have an administrator announce that with the FAA, you have no idea what that means, like what that entails. That's what's scary about it. Like, what do you mean by busy?
right. Absolutely. Busy, busy how? I mean, we know from it wasn't that long ago, several articles came out. The FAA specifically went to the New York Tracon area, JFK, LaGuardia, Newark, and said to the airliners servicing those airports, the FAA asked them to voluntarily give up 10% so they can add a little extra layer of safety in that area ahead of the summer season.
Mm-hmm.
That is that's a tall order, is what that is. Especially in an area like that, summer's coming, travel's coming. A lot of folks want to travel, and New York is famously busy. And unfortunately, you have other things that are adding to the issue. So, and actually, I'm glad we are talking about this because it kind of does bring up our next article.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and swap over real quick. All right, we're over here at the this is the New York Fox 5 website, or fox5ny.com. Air traffic controllers shortage. The FAA is to cut service to New York by 10% this summer. At least that was the request of the airlines. The FAA wants them to reduce their numbers. Well, the FAA wants the airlines to reduce their flights. If we look through this article here, we can see it says, according to the FAA, the Air Traffic Control Center in New York is staffed 54% compared to the national average of 81%. How?
Yeah, it's you would hope those numbers would be flip flopped around, considering
Sure.
New York airspace. And it's like we talked about before. My last tour that I flew, we were around the Northeast the whole time, and those air traffic controllers, when you call up on departure and you talk to approach, they just sound like they are worn out. They are just so tired, and a lot of that is because they don't have enough employees. And I think that goes back to all of the incidents and close calls that we've seen this year and this past year too, of these runway incursions. I think a lot of that
Mm-hmm.
has to do with fatigue, not having enough employees that are air traffic controllers. Because as soon as COVID hit, they just completely stopped the training process. They stopped hiring. And as you and I both know, it takes around 3 years to become an air traffic controller. So you have a good at least 2 years of people not being trained and people not being hired. And that is why we're seeing the shortage now. It's a huge
Mm-hmm.
problem, and not just in New York, but everywhere. We're seeing it more and more everywhere we fly to, West Coast, East Coast, you name it. There's a shortage of air
Mm-hmm.
traffic controllers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard stories, and there's probably a few articles we could provide. France air traffic control has been on
Yeah.
strike. Looks like Germany is going to have some air traffic control strikes in their area. I think I heard Belgium, and a couple of maybe Portugal. I
Mm-hmm.
think I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look. But there's several other countries. We're not the only one. Of course, it is across the board. You're absolutely right. We need more air traffic controllers. We really do. And as you said, with a 3-year training process, you would think somewhere somebody is teaching, training, and certifying a ton of people that they're just constantly trying to train and get them out and get them into get them to work.
Yeah, you
Really,
would think that.
you would think that. I mean, 54% at New York TraCon, and you have, and that's of the national average is 81%,
Mm-hmm.
and I would think New York New York should be an example of the way the rest of the country air traffic controllers could run. I mean, it's super efficient. They're getting a lot of planes in and out. And don't get me wrong, the fact they're running at 54% is nothing short of
Oh
magic,
yeah,
because that's
it
amazing that they're still even running and operating at those
it
levels.
speaks to their efficiency. Um, like I was saying, the last tour I flew, talking to the New York controllers, they sound like they're just so tired, but they're on their game. They
Hmm.
they know what
They
they're
are.
doing. I mean, they've done it a million times, and you can tell they've been trained very well to handle all of this traffic coming in and out. They expect it. When you're around the New York area, you expect all this traffic to be coming in and out of your airspace. So they're trained to hold that standard. So yeah, I completely agree. When you're down to 54% and you can still run that airspace like they are doing now, it's very, very impressive.
It is impressive. I mean, we none of us want our air traffic controllers to be
Right.
overworked or underpaid. They should be compensated fairly for their work, because they have a tremendous task to keep all of us out here flying around separate, safe, and also keep their wits about them
Yeah.
during all this. If I thought it would be legal or encouraged to drive up to my local air traffic control facility and drop off a fresh pot of coffee and a box of donuts, I would.
Yep.
I think a lot of pilots would probably agree with me that uh, we appreciate our air traffic controllers.
100%.
They do a really good job. We need y'all. We really do. And we hope things get better up there at New York, and we hope things get better across the country. It wasn't that long ago. I know we just got done talking about Mr. Nolan, but I think it was last Thursday, I believe, on Twitter. The FAA they send a lot of news and information toward Twitter these days. But there was a video that was put up by Billy Nolan, uh, talking about their upcoming air traffic controller hiring days. They're going to have some open days between May 5th and May 8th, where they want to hire around 1,500 air traffic controllers this year and 1,800 controllers next year, to bring on a little over 3,000 new air traffic controllers over the next 2 years. That's wonderful
Mm-hmm.
news. Wonderful news. I just hope it actually happens.
Same. And the fact, like, you don't need a college degree. So if you're interested in becoming an air traffic controller, you don't have to worry about a college degree. They provide all the training for you. All you have to show is proof that you graduated from high school. And then they take you and they train you for around 3 years. And then you're a full certified ATC air traffic controller. And you get paid very well for it too. You're looking at some of
Mm-hmm.
these salaries, you start off at 6 figures. Uh, that's amazing when you don't have to have a degree to even get close to that salary.
that's really good. I mean, it is a really good
And it's well
opportunity.
deserved. I mean, I could not imagine being an air traffic controller. I couldn't do it. Flying planes is enough for me. I do not want to be the person to tell the planes where to go. No, I don't want to do it.
uh, it is a very specific, highly skilled, attuned. It takes a special person to go in there and do that work, and that's why I say that we just cannot thank our air traffic controllers enough. We really can't. They do so much, and it seems like they need help. They need the support of the FAA to keep them going. And look, if the estimates for this summer's air travel are correct, we are going to see a busy
Mm-hmm.
summer. And how many new air traffic controllers would we have hired by June, by July, by August? Are we going to start seeing some increase, or are we going to see massive delays? I think what they say down here, that there's a potential of seeing upwards of it could be 45% worse than last year as far as all the delays in air traffic. Um, let's hope that that's not the case.
Right. And the rest
Let's
of the
hope.
article says, again, it all stems from the pandemic because
Mm-hmm.
they completely stopped training. They completely stopped hiring. And then you also had a lot of air traffic controllers that were really close to retirement age or were at the retirement age. So, of course, they
Mm-hmm.
retired. And there was a lot of them as well that were, furloughed and got to the point where they're like, okay, you know what? I'm not coming back to this. We don't know how long this pandemic's going to last. I'm going to go do something else. Uh,
I'm gonna right find another job, go do something
Exactly.
right.
And that happened to a lot of pilots too. A lot of pilots were furloughed and then they were forced into retirement early because of the pandemic. And they're like, you know what? I'm not coming back. If I get furloughed
Yeah,
and they don't know how long the pandemic's going to last, I'm just going to go find another career.
yeah, yeah. And it was a lot of that was up in the air. I
Yeah.
mean, it was an ordeal for a few years, and now we're looking at, and they say it all the time in these articles. We're getting back to that pre-pandemic uh, flow of things, and honestly, I think we're beyond that. We've seen such an increase in travel and everything else recently that uh, the FAA they have a lot on their plate. They have a lot to
Oh, yeah.
deal with, and we'll see how it works out. I'm hoping they'll get a brand new admin will come in, and the FAA will get everything sorted out. Who
Knock it
knows?
out of the park. I hope so too, for all of our sake.
I do too. Well, that will lead us to our next article. We'll go ahead and do that. We have one last article here I wanted to talk with Sawyer today about, and so this article over here, this can be found at aopa.org. I'm sure some of you watching this video are familiar with AOPA. Over here, it's talking about Trent Palmer, and some of you are probably aware who Trent Palmer is. Those of you who don't, Trent Palmer is a YouTuber. He is a uh, drone pilot. He is a man pilot, and he has a fair amount of followers online. Well, this pilot, and let me be a little more specific. He flies typically the what we'll call backwooded areas, or uh, in a desert, or uh, out
Yeah.
back in places that are wooded, perhaps places that are far outside of airspace, far away from cities, far away from
Like a bush
airports,
pilot.
like a
Hmm.
bush pilot. He's basically a bush pilot, yeah. And he has produced some pretty amazing videos, has shown a lot of people things that normally they would have never seen. And a couple years ago, Trent he was going. It was a low pass or a low pass inspection of a field he thought he might land at. Well, he did not land at the field, and when he did his low approach, one of the people who lived in the area was not they they weren't too keen on him doing a low inspection, and so they called and reported Mr. Palmer, and so there's been this whole case brought against him out there at Reno, Nevada, and so recently he had gone to the FAA, and the FAA had given him a 60-day suspension of his pilot certificate, which any of us who are flying and flying is a part of our career, part of our paycheck, knows that if you get suspended for 60 days, that's a
It's a
big
long
deal.
time. Very
That's a
long
long
time.
time. And the part of this news article that really shows us what this whole thing is about is that the NTSB decided to step in and revert the decision of the FAA from 60 days and say, look, Trent Palmer needs the full 120-day suspension. And that's what they went with. The NTSB came in and said, it's not 60, it's the full 120. Your suspension continues.
Which is weird. That's
now,
weird for the NTSB.
I was going to, so you're looking at this, you got the NTSB involved. The FAA is clearly all over this. And you have a YouTuber with 500,000 followers. What do you make?
I think it's all about making an example of someone. They see the amount of followers he has. They see how popular his YouTube videos are. And again, it's what we talked about before we started. You know, he's flying backwoods. He's as far away from actual both towered and non-towered civilian airports as you possibly can be. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but with the property owner that complained also had security footage. I guess it was from a Ring doorbell or something like that on their property, where they actually recorded him flying. And there's no dispute about how low he was flying and that he busted that 500-foot radius bubble of property, people, things like that. But he was looking at a field, which you're 100% legal to do, to determine if it's suitable to land on. When you're flying backcountry, you have to do that. It's a huge safety concern.
Oh, yeah.
And so because the NTSB is involved now and because he's a YouTuber, I think they're kind of going at it at a different angle. Their whole reason for doing this is because he busted that 500-foot radius, which nobody, and again, he did not dispute that. But the problem is because he did not land. After he looked at the field and he determined that, okay, this is not going to be suitable for me to land on, he did not land on that field. He decided to keep going and land at an actual airport afterwards. I believe that's what it said at the end of the article. He went somewhere else and actually landed at a local airport. But that becomes an issue in the future for anybody that's flying and they're wanting to land on a field. That essentially puts the pilot at risk of every time they determine that the field is not suitable, they could lose their certificate or get a suspension because they decided not to land on that field. Because it says in the article that he was as low as 30 feet because he was trying to determine the quality of the field. And so that puts everybody at a huge safety risk because then in your mind, in the back of your head, you're thinking, okay, either I land on this field that I don't think is safe enough, or I risk getting a violation and a suspension because I go around and I decided not to land on this field and I busted the 500-foot bubble. So, again, it's all about making an example of this guy, but this is the wrong example. This is the wrong person to choose to make an example of. If you ask me, the guy that was flying that tail dragger and jumped out of the tail dragger, I can't remember what altitude he was at. He had a parachute on and just
that was
Yeah.
that's a
Oh,
goober right
100%.
there.
I know I
That
know
guy's
they're
a
after him,
goober.
but they need to go, more after this guy instead of attacking Trent Palmer for he made the right call. If it's not suitable for landing, he does not have to land there.
And you're right. It does it makes other pilots a little concerned about that very reason. Am I going to get a call from the FAA for doing a low approach at a field to check to see if the field is in
Mm-hmm.
good condition? And if it's not in good condition and I decide not to land there, I get penalized?
Right.
That doesn't sound right, you know? Now, certainly, I'm sure that when the NTSB had looked at the camera, or, the film, the evidence, whatever, they decided, it was really low and this, that, and the other. But I agree with you. I don't think this is necessarily the right person to make an example out of. I don't think it's the right case to make an example. I mean, we've got near miss, possible collisions at major airports with major
Right.
airlines, cargo carriers, and they want to go and hassle somebody who's a backwoods pilot as far away from airports and congested areas as one can get. And this person is all over the news articles for being that example. I agree with you. I don't think this is the right
No,
move
and
necessarily.
his whole case against the FAA and the NTSB, it's the like it says in the article, it's the first 7 words of the regulation, and that is except when necessary for takeoff and landing, and it goes back to that
Mm-hmm.
500-foot radius. If he bursts that bubble, it was necessary for takeoff and landing. Well, that's essentially what he was doing. He was trying to determine if it was safe enough to perform a landing. And so you have every right to go in and determine whether or not that field is going to be safe. So it
I mean, I don't want to land on a bad field. I don't want to put myself or my aircraft in harm's way or at risk. He's already landing in the grass. He's already landing in an area that is
right.
undeveloped. So potholes, roots, rocks. He's already landing in an area that's not it's not
Yep.
well groomed. So to be cautious when you are going to be landing in an environment like that, I wholeheartedly agree. Get low, take a look. Is that a good spot? If it is, come on in and land. You know, what? When is the time where most of us have our accidents? It's
Yep.
takeoff and landing.
You're exactly right.
So
And when it's essential to safety, it's going to be necessary. You have to do it. I mean, I can't imagine, going with against an argument like that of why did you not land here? Because it wasn't safe. Well, you should have landed there. Well, I'm not going to land there if I don't think it's safe. You can't force me to land somewhere that I don't think is safe. Sorry, I'm not going to do it.
yeah, and again, that doesn't make the rest of us feel good. That if we did the same thing, let's say we were anywhere else, anywhere else, but we didn't
Mm-hmm.
land, and now we get penalized for it. I mean,
I want to know more about.
maybe there's more to it. Maybe I
Yeah,
don't have all the
there could
facts.
be. I want to know more about this neighbor. I feel like this is your typical neighbor that just likes to complain for the sake of complaining. Like the way it sounds, like the fact that they had footage of it, the fact that they're the ones that filed the complaint. I I just want to know who this neighbor is because the plane he's flying, it's not like it's a commercial airliner and he's buzzing the top of their building and shaking everything, making feel like there's an earthquake all around you. He's in a little tail dragger that he's flying. I mean,
Yeah,
he's backwoods flying, backcountry.
I would think the trees would do more damage than his
Right.
aircraft, but you know, but that's hey, they had a concern, they made a call, and now it went from hey, we don't want this person flying near our house or this close to this
Mm-hmm.
field, to now it's a
Right.
national headline.
Which, and I can understand on the other side of the neighbor, like they could have been worried about it at first. You don't know who's flying the plane. you don't know what's going on.
That's true. Maybe that neighbor had no idea that Trent was a YouTuber and had 500,000 people
Right.
that follow Trent. Maybe. But what we see here, and this is right outside Reno Stead, which, by the way, as we all know, this is the last year of the Reno
Mm-hmm.
Air Races coming up in September, and it's because the people in the neighborhoods around the airport have complained about the airplanes for so long that they're genuinely getting rid of the Reno Air Races after 60
Oh, it's so sad.
years. So you may be onto something,
Yeah.
Sawyer. Maybe it's just
Yep.
the neighborhood.
Complaining for the sake of complaining.
It may
That's
be.
like when you
It
have
may be.
neighborhoods around airports, and the airports have been there longer than the neighborhoods, and you have the property owners
Mhm.
complaining about the noise. It's like, well, don't build a house next to an airport. It's that simple.
Next to
Like,
an
what do
airport.
you expect?
There's and it's not that sure that we can always make new technologies and do a little better here and there, and I get that, but there's been, and this isn't the first time. I mean, you have case after case after case across this country
Mm-hmm.
where that's happened, where airport is there, it's been there, neighbors move in, neighbors complain about the noise, and now the airport has to move. One example, Mobile, Alabama. Mobile downtown was downtown. They had so many complaints that now Mobile is no longer downtown. They got Mobile as
Mm-hmm.
north of the city now. So it's a prime example.
And if they don't have to move, they have to follow certain noise abatement procedures too. So
Can't fly at a certain time at night. You can only descend at a certain gradient. There's all kinds of extra things that go on when the noise abatement regulations come in. Oh, what a thing. What a thing. Well, we have certainly had fun today going over some of these articles. Talked a little bit about Mr. Palmer, a little bit about the FAA's plans for this summer and their air traffic controllers. We hope all the air traffic controllers, you find jobs, you get paid more than, way more than you need. That's what we hope, because you're needed. All of the air traffic
For
controllers
sure.
are needed. And whoever they choose to replace Mr. Billy Nolan, I know it's a big set of shoes to fill. That is a important position. So hopefully we'll see some progress there. But all right, Sawyer, do you have any last words for us before
No,
we
not
get out
really.
of
I
here?
appreciate you having me today, Ken. I had a good time talking with you about it, and discussing some things before the podcast started, and kind of leading into all the articles that we discussed. I've had a great time. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, me too. No problem. Hey, we're
That
gonna have to
sounds
have
good
you
with
back.
me anytime.
Excellent, excellent. All right, everyone. Well, that's going to do it for us today at the Aviation Podcast. If you like what you heard, please consider subscribing, leave a like, maybe even a comment about what we talked about today. And until next time, take care. Okay, that'll do
Nice
it.
job. That was great.
Fantastic, man. That was
I
awesome.
enjoyed that.
Woohoo! I did too. That was a good one. And